Alright, so before I get into this review, I'd just like to address the elephant in the room. The Final Girls is a satire on gory slasher movies of the 80s, and it's only rated PG-13. The Final Girls follows this teenage girl who's going with her friends to see this cheesy 80s slasher movie called Camp Bloodbath, which stars her recently deceased mother. Obviously, this is something that she's not too keen on, but while they're seeing the movie, disaster strikes, and through an unexplainable turn of events, she and her friends end up being transported into the world of this slasher movie. Now, the reason I wanted to get this PG-13 thing out of the way at the beginning of the video is because I know that's going to be an issue for a lot of people, but personally, for my money, I ended up enjoying The Final Girls quite a bit. As a satire movie, I thought that this film was pretty damn on point. I mean, as it was making fun of certain slasher movie tropes, like the cliched slasher movie flashback scene or the cliched slasher movie slow motion scene, it's pretty damn hilarious. The characters in the movie within the movie are just so overly stupid that it's actually really funny. They didn't even come off as annoying to me. There's even one guy in the film within the film who's like the cliched jock character who thinks that he's a lot funnier and more charming than he actually is. In a more serious movie, this guy probably would have been the character that I hated the most, but in this, he was just so goofy and his lines were so cheesy that he ended up being my favorite character. Also, I love the visual style of this movie. I mean, I remember when I was revisiting Coppola's Dracula recently for a comparison that I did, I remember thinking to myself, I wish that there were more movies that were like this that just went over the top with their visuals. And while The Final Girls is not nearly as over the top as Coppola's Dracula, it's still pretty far out there. But I mean, it's really cool to look at. I love the color scheme for Camp Bloodbath. It's very bright and vivid and just beautiful to look at. It's not like headache inducing. I love some of the special effects they utilized, like especially during the flashback scene. I thought that looked really cool. And even though this is a PG-13, they didn't cut it to be that way. They actually shot it to be PG-13, and I'm going to get into the reasons why they did that in a moment. But the way that they went about some of the kill scenes was actually really creative in this movie and pretty cool to look at. There's even one death that's fully on screen, and it's the type of thing that they could very well get away with in a PG-13 film, and it actually made me flinch a little bit to watch. Another thing that I loved about this movie is that it has a certain amount of heart going for it as well. I mentioned in my synopsis that the main girl in the film has a deceased mother who was one of the actresses in Camp Bloodbath. And while she isn't meeting her mother in person, she is, of course, meeting that character that she played. And there are a few moments between them that I found genuinely effective. I mean, I did not expect this movie to hit the mark as well as it did in that regard. Now, the reason this movie is rated PG-13 is because of that element of heart I just mentioned. According to the director, by his logic, the emotional scenes wouldn't have had quite the same amount of impact if the film had been very gory. But I mean, also the director had personal reasons for doing this. Apparently, his father had passed away not long before the movie was made, and so it was kind of his way of coping with it. So I really can see where he's coming from, but I mean, at the same time, I feel like if you're going to make a slasher comedy, then the comedy should come first. The slasher movie element could should come after that, and then right behind that should be that element of heart. And I think it could have still worked to an effective level. I mean, my all-time favorite movie, not movie, but my all-time favorite slasher movie specifically is Hatchet. And there's a point where that movie does the, cliched slasher movie flashback scene. And even though you've just witnessed this over the top comedy and these crazy gore effects, I actually found the flashback scene in that movie to be very sad and effective. So, I mean, again, I think he could have pulled it off very well if he had made more of an attempt to make this appeal to fans of the genre. Aside from the whole PG 13 thing, one other nitpick that I have with this movie is that once they introduce the final girl from Camp Bloodbath, really the only thing that makes her innocent is the fact that she's a virgin. But I mean, she's also a smoker and a drinker, and they just introduce her as this very over the top sort of badass character. And the direction that they end up taking this girl is okay with me, but what I would have preferred to see would have been if they had presented her at first as this very over the top sweetheart, like so much so that she's actually sort of a pushover, and then once things start going downhill and the shit hits the fan, then she just instantly flips into the badass mode with the torn jeans and the cigarette in her mouth, and she's like, let's go get this bastard. I mean, I think that would have been hilarious. In spite of my nitpicks for this movie, though, I still thought The Final Girls was pretty good. I mean, I love the heart, I love the visual style. Again, the humor is very on point, and I can understand why the PG 13 thing might be a deal breaker for some of you, but if you can look past that, then The Final Girls does come recommended. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about this movie. I hope you all have a good one.